Are you trying to become a better IGL? Well, that's great because today I'm going to be talking about one of the most important aspects of IGLing, which is, of course, your rotates. Your rotates are going to determine how your games go and if you can qualify for some of these victory cups that are taking place this season. So, let's get right into it. But first, what is an IGL and why is it so difficult? An IGL is the in-game leader. This is the person that's making decisions and calling the shots. And why is it so difficult? It's because each scenario is different. You can't train your in-game leading skills like you can your mechanics. You can't just hop into Raiders and know how to become a better IGL. It's something that's developed over time. Now that you know what an IGL is, let's get right into the meat of this video, how you can become a better one. And a large part of that is your rotates. Rotates are a fundamental part of every single game of Fortnite. It's how you get from one zone to the next without dying. So, how can you improve your rotates? A rotate can be broken down into two main parts. The first of which is your path, which is how you're going to get from one zone to the other. Are you going to use natural terrain or other people's builds? Stuff like that. The other part of a rotate is the timing. How are you going to time your rotate so that you get looked at by the least amount of teams? One of the most important parts of your path is choosing where you rotate. Are you going to use valleys or use hills to cover your terrain from other teams that could possibly shoot at you? Take this game from the Squad's Cash Cup as an example.
Instead of forcing ourselves through the middle, we loot up and end up dropping down into this little valley where no one can see us. Because we've now cut off line of sight, because here really no one can see us, so we're able to refarm our mats. Whereas if we had tried to go down the center over here, there's almost nothing to refarm, and there would have been teams holding us like that team right there. However, because of our decision to go down the river, we're able to refarm a lot of mats, and we get a really free rotate over here. Now, while it's unlikely you'll get a whole side of zone uncontested in more stack games, this kind of just shows that if you're a good IGL, you'll be able to notice the little situations that you can use to your advantage to get your team out of a shambles situation.
Another great example, this one from a stacked EU game, kind of shows how pro players use the natural environment to their advantage to choose how they rotate.
Akira and Karama, who just won the EU Victory Cash Cup Opens, have just come in from Storm, and they've chose to box up on this house. Now, why do they do this? It's because they understand the natural environment around them. They know that this house is mainly made out of brick, which is what they are lacking right now. So they box up on this house to refarm most of their mats safely, because in this house, they can just refarm everything and then replace it with their own builds.
Whereas beginner IGLs wouldn't have boxed up in a spot where they could refarm anything, and even some advanced IGLs would box up in a spot where there was only wood or metal to refarm, Akira and Karama knew what they were doing when they did this. Now, let's move on to the other crucial part of choosing your path, which is, of course, the other players in the lobby. Take this game, which is the same one from the last clip, from Akira and Karama.
Now, it's in the 7th zone, and Karama and Akira have not pulled. The zone is pulling northeast, so why do they go out the west side of this house? Because they've scouted this rotate, and they understand the players around them. As you can see here, there's literally no one behind them. So, instead of rotating out the front, where there are multiple teams, they go out the back so that they can get a freer rotate. Now, you can also see here that they use their natural environment. They use this building and some old builds to cover themselves from the one team that can shoot at them, which is right here. All of these simple decisions that may seem small add up and make a really free rotate out of what could have been really difficult if they had done it wrong.
One last part here about understanding the teams around you, and this part might bleed a little bit into the timing, is that if you're shambles, you should not be going early. You should let the teams in front of you use their own builds to cover your own rotate, because you want to save as many mats as you can for the endgame. Something that I feel that a lot of beginner IGLs get wrong is feeling that they always need to be the first person into the new zone, which is not the case, especially in stack games where it's going to be very difficult to get in early. Sometimes you have to go with the flow and let teams around you create your own path. Now, a principle that most IGLs know is congested side and dead side, with congested side being where most players are and dead side being where the least players are. However, most Fortnite IGLs might not know how they can use this to their advantage besides just getting to dead side. Now, the best Fortnite IGL, such as Queasy and Acorn, will usually get their team into the dead side during 6th zone by using medkits to tank zone. This tactic, which is especially effective in stack games, allows pros to refarm their mats and get themselves into a good position without sacrificing all of their heals and mats. And they do this just by understanding where most of the other players in the lobby are going to be. Take this example from one of my games, which was very unstacked, but it shows a very good principle.
I get a spare Blinky Fish, and I'm able to rotate. Now, why do I choose this spot to go, whereas I could have gone straight down the center and white-lined it? First off, because there's two teams here, and these two teams would most likely spray me because I'm a solo. I also know that if I go this way, and one of the teams tries to pressure me, the other will just shoot them in the back instead of focusing on me. The third reason is because I know that most of the teams here will be on this north or northwest side of zone. Sure enough, once zone ends up pulling, you can see all these teams here start to rotate into the same area of zone, which will become the congested side. Now, all these teams here are stuck and they all have to wait for one another to rotate. And zone pulls max for them, southeast. Now, if you can see this map here, everyone is crowded on the north side of zone except for me. So I have the freest rotate of all time.
Now that you guys understand how the path that you choose to rotate through can deeply affect how your rotate and your game goes, let's move on to the other crucial part of your rotates, which is your timing. Are you going to go early, late, or somewhere in the middle? Usually, I wouldn't recommend going somewhere in the middle unless you're the second team to go because you've waited for a team in front of you to go in front of you without getting shot. So let's talk about going early. Going early is usually reserved for when you have a lot of confidence and a lot of resources at your disposal. You can afford to lose a little bit of materials going early and getting into an optimal position going into the next zone. And going early doesn't mean you have to rotate all the way. A lot of teams will just rotate a little bit in front of everyone else, especially when they're on congested side, so that they have zone priority if zone pulls far. That means that they get to go first in front of everyone else so that they can get into a better position in the next zone. Doing early mini rotates can really help you out. Take this example from one of my games.
Now, another important thing here of when we rotate is that I end up tarping a little bit ahead here because Gavin and I both have Blinkfish, and Blinkfish only lasts 15 seconds. So, since zone is pulling about over here, we don't exactly know where or how many people are over here. So, tarping to a better position here allows us to see more of the expanding zone so that we can choose a better spot to land. Sure enough, now we pop our Blinkfish and we make a really free rotate, only having to use one dash and get ourselves into a really good position here.
However, an important aspect of going early is not going too early so that teams that are boxed up are really only looking at you. Because if you go too early, then there's going to be almost no one else rotating. So teams that are already in zone will just shoot at you. To demonstrate this, I have two examples, the first of which is from me and Gavin, and the second of which is from Karama and Akira.
So, in this game, it's 6 zone, and Gavin and I have put ourselves into a pretty good position going into this zone. So, when it pulls, we're one of the first ones to go, because there's almost no one in front of us, where it's pulling across this crazy valley. However, what we decide to do here is very important. Instead of just white lining it straight across here, we decide to take our time to refarm. Why? Because we've allowed ourselves to go early, there's almost no one watching us. There's only one guy who is a solo hiding inside of a building. So, doing this allows us to refarm most of our mats, and it allows us to get better timing going into the zone. Because if we'd gone too early, then this team right here and this team right here might not have been shooting at each other, and they might have decided to focus us. But since, by the time we get into this area of the map, they're shooting at each other and focused on each other, we're able to get a much freer rotate. Now, this leads to us being able to get into a really good spot in zone, basically freely, and since we're on a relatively uncongested side of zone, we're going to have a much freer rotate in the next zone. Now, another important thing here is their timing. The teams around them, there's only one boxed up. There's one rotating, and there's a couple fighting around them. So, this means that their rotate is really free, because only one team can hold them.
Now, all the replays that you see were pre-recorded, so I can't change what I said. But what I was trying to say was this. If they had decided to go a little bit earlier, the teams that were in front of them would not have been shooting at each other, and they might have focused Karama and Akira since they were the last ones to get into the zone. Now, let's get on to when you should be rotating in late. The first and most important example of this is when you're shambles, because when you're shambles, you don't have the mats to hold if someone sprays you because you go early. When you go in late, you're trying to get in and just get in. You're not trying to get into the best position or the optimal spot to get and play for height and win the game. You're trying to just get into zone and keep surviving. Similarly to most IGLs thinking that they have to be the first ones in zone, you don't necessarily have to be the last one in zone, and it's not a bad thing, because when you're the last one in zone, it allows you to save a lot of mats that you might have used otherwise, because you're able to recycle other people's tarps and old builds. This suits more passive teams, who don't need to find as many refreshes in endgame because they'd conserve their mats more during the mid-game. Well, anyways, that's all I have for this video. If you guys want me to keep continuing the series, or just put things that you want me to add in the next episode, then drop them down below in the comments. By the way, these videos take so long to make, so I would heavily appreciate it if you guys liked and subscribed. But other than that, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace!